Welcome back, everybody. This is Grace, and today we are going to be covering the release for Father's Day and the Surfboards event in the Golden Gift Boxes, which is pretty exciting. But before all that, let me fix my window size. Okay, I think we're good. Now, just briefly, I have not bought all of the items yet. Oh, wrong button. Actually, that's fine. I've not bought all of the items yet. I don't know which items I'm going to buy, but I'll show you where to buy them just very briefly before I start talking about them. Now, if you've seen my release reviews before, you might know that I like to talk about the items, how they might work against other competition that already exists, and then kind of value them how I see them. Of course, it's my opinion, so definitely take it your own. We've got the Mana Heatwave board, the Invigorating Unity board, and the Nilak's Charm Surfboard in the rare tier. And for the ultra rare, we have the classic Carnax knee board, which is spelled wrong intentionally, I think. That's kind of funny. The Sunscale's Tubular Legacy Surfboard, and the Archknight's Adversary Shortboard. Oh, I'm not loving these Arctic puns, but hey, is what it is. And then of course we have Father's Day, which released this year a new tokens weapon and a pet. So we got the flashy Godfather. It's just a light paralyzed pet, nothing crazy. But we also got the Fathershed Moment, which is a token weapon, and that is actually the first weapon I'm going to start talking about after I get set up in my somewhere battles. So excuse me while I do that. But I'm just going to be doing these battles as some background, which is what I'll be doing while I talk. So I'm just going to run a pretty basic setup here. Nothing too crazy going on. Slapping around with some random weapons, having a good time, giving it my best go. So, the Fathershed Moment is a weapon that basically has all element seeking for 130 HP per turn. So that's going to be the basics of it. It seeks all elements for 80% for 130 or so HP per turn, which is really good. It does full damage, it is all LE seeks, it has a -5 VTH lane, which can be nice if you use other items. But yeah, that's it. That's the really big thing about it. It's all LE seeking. Now that on its own, I actually don't think is a huge driver. Like, you have 8 weapons for a reason. You don't really need LE seeking, and on top of that, for me on my warriors, because it's a melee weapon of course, I generally use one damaging weapon, usually a Bloodblade or Multi-Maul depending on the circumstance, for all of my elemental attacks, since I use a lot of weapon-based skills. You could also use imbues too to help supplement that playstyle. I'm sure not everyone does that, but for me, 1 or 2 damaging weapons is all I need to deal damage in a way I like in all 8 elements. Obviously I'm not doing that now, so feel free to think what you will. But the two big things about this, or the other big thing about this, that it also can do a choke effect. You pay SP to inflict a choke, and the amount of SP and damage you pay from the weapon, so it's about 15% melee and damage and SP, which is like I think 75 SP or whatever. That's not quite right. No, it's like 60 SP. Anyways, no big deal, somewhere around there. But you inflict a 27 times elemental resistance choke for 2 turns, which is really, really good in my opinion. And that like pretty much outcompetes every choke weapon that I know of in terms of choke, in terms of the raw value of it. But not only that, it is split between weapon damage and SP, so you're not bleeding out your SP, and since it LE seeks, it's always going by the strongest resistance. So that's just really good, because I think choke is a hugely powerful status, and this is a universal way to inflict it on any monster. Now that being said, a lot of bosses do have sub 100% resistances, so you might find that your choke, when you really need it against a tough boss, is going to be less powerful than you'd like. But that being said, there's very few bosses that are like below 75 across everything, so you should be just fine. And then also there's a small passive on the weapon, which reduces the monster's incoming healing. So by my analysis, there's not really any direct competition for this item. So there's the Ultra Dragon Scythe of Elements, which is an ultra rare golden gift box, so about the same price. And it gives 8 elements. And it doesn't cost SP or HP, it reduces the weapon damage and makes the monster deal more damage. So it's basically an indirect HP cost, but usually it'll end up less depending on your setup and loadout. But in terms of choke, there's not, like I said, I don't know of any weapons that inflict that much choke. Crazy this fusion lasted so long. But so like there's nothing that I think really competes that directly with it, which is kind of cool. Yeah, we're gonna use let's use Porsche Void Vanquisher here. Why not? Okay, a little fire burn. So now he'll attack with darks. We'll go to our dark setup. There we go. Should be good. I'm gonna use Zardade. Now for the next weapons. So I'm a big fan of the Fathershed Moment for the choke. I'm not a big fan for the elemental compression, but the choke and the elemental compression together I think is stellar. Really stellar. Now for the surfboards, I'm going to start with the rare tier. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Warlic's Mana Heatwave board, which is a 0 proc magic fire weapon. And my initial thoughts, as you can see on screen, were there isn't much competition because this effect is so unusual among weapons that like it doesn't matter what you do, you know, like it's just like that random. But basically what it does is when the enemy loses mana, it gets an Elevon. So you can trigger this with your own effects to make them lose mana. I think some of them work, not all of them work. I haven't tested it all very thoroughly at all, realistically. But basically, if you damage the monster's mana, or the monster does a spell cast, it will take a significant fire Elevon. At the moment it's bugged, but it can be pretty significant. Bugged to be too weak. Well, sometimes too weak, sometimes too strong. Anyways, it's bugged. But that being said, I think that's a cool ass effect, honestly. But I'm a little bit hesitant on it because just like the basics of it, you know, because spellcasting enemies are so rare, and enemies with a wide mana pool, even if you are going to do like a fun cheesy thing to like reduce their mana, it's scaled based off of the amount of mana they lose. So enemies with a big enough mana pool to really get a huge Elevon are probably going to be pretty rare to see. And on top of that, we have a lot of good accessible mage fire weapons. Heroic Titan gives you spell damage and statuses. Blood Blades give you attack damage and spell damage, and that's seasonal with the Void. The Pumpkin Spice Tablet, while a lot of people aren't a fan of it, it is a guaranteed way to get celerity. And it is a way to do a lot of damage in one turn, so I mean it's alright. The Fire Cutlass is an ultra rare golden gift box, which is more expensive than this, but and that's like big spell damage. And the Rebirth Staff is a seasonal fire weapon, which can give you really strong choke imbues kind of on your fire spell casts. So I struggle to see that this board will be worth it for most people in day-to-day use. But if you want to set up a crazy fire nuke and obliterate the monster's MP to get a massive Elevon, you can totally do that, and I'm sure it'll be really fun to pop off with. So I don't think this is great for general use, but against MP dropping monsters or with a weird MP destroying setup, which I might try to do in a later video. We'll see. We'll see if I can make it work. It could be pretty handy. So the next one that I'm going to talk about is the Nilak's Charm Surfboard. What this guy does is specifically it is a melee ice weapon, and what it does is it eats burn to boost strength and charisma. And so the boost it can give is up to 117 or 200% melee burn, I think. I forget exactly, but it can boost them up by up to 117. Now, if you know me, you know I'm a huge fan of effects that boost stats. Stats are massive in today's meta. They give a ton of damage and accuracy. They give a ton of damage and accuracy to your pet. And this one obviously does both with strength and charisma. So I think for Beast Warriors, use my drinking water. The idea of this weapon is really, really good. And the fact that there are so many ways to inflict a burn that you can then eat with this weapon, I think makes it even better. I think some stuff I was thinking about was Paladin, because with Paladin you have a burn infliction on your basic attacks with the Paladin's light toggle, and that has Ellie comp, so it's a pretty strong burn relatively. You can also use a burn weapon like I don't know, Candy Sword. I just can't think of one off the top of my head for melee. To inflict more burn in that turn and then eat it with the Ice Sword the next turn. You could also use, say, Heroic Titan Sword, and eat it with the Ice Weapon on the next turn, because Heroic Titan's Fist gives, or not Sword, Fist, gives a permanent fire burn. So actually, as long as you do 2 hits, that'll be 200% melee for a max eat. I should do that in a video. We'll file that for later. But the short answer is I really like this weapon because there's a lot of ways to inflict a burn without too much hassle. And that means there's a lot of ways you can then eat the burn with Nilak Surfboard for a massive strength and charisma boost. Keep in mind, I didn't give any numbers, but the strength boost will be about a 23-24% increase in damage and a 18 accuracy bonus for just the player. And for your pet, it'll do about the same, because you'll get the same amount of accuracy split between your strength and charisma, but you'll get the same amount of damage just from the charisma. So I'm a huge fan of the eat, and I think because we have so many ways to inflict burn, it's going to be really good. But that being said, there is a lot of melee ice burn gear that I want to talk about, because I think there's enough great items that you might feel troubled. There's enough great ice items that you might feel troubled fitting this into your inventory. So one, I'm just going to go with some other options. Nightmare Piercer is a panic option, so Beastmasters often play defensively. Panic is a defensive status, could be pretty handy. Legion Glaive is a Ultra Rare Golden Gift Box Siphon Poison weapon. It's a pretty good Siphon Poison weapon. It's based off hit count. I think, is that only a ranged weapon? Did I make a mistake on my spreadsheet? Hold on. Okay, so turns out I totally messed up my spreadsheet. You guys are seeing the fixed version, obviously. But there are a lot of good ice weapons for warriors. One is, I'll just go through some. Nightmare Splitter, it's a panic option. Like I said, Great Turret fully defensive. If I repeat myself, my bad. I got distracted and had to come back and do some other things. But anyways, we're back to it. So the Legion Doombringer, it's kind of like a nothing item, except that it's kind of good for doing damage. Or not doing damage against undead, so like rare cases you'll want that. Burden of Insight, of course, is a staple auto hit option. I'm a huge fan of auto hit. Magna Blade, staple damage option, big damage, better than most weapons. New Year's Blade, so actually I'll skip that. Horror Void, arm compression, can be very handy. And then the other ones that I can do now are Hollowborn Frostreaver, which is a poison option instead of a burn option, so depending on your status build, depending on the boss's damage cap, that might be better or worse for you. Legion Spawn Bonker is just a great bossing weapon. It is an ultra rare gift box though. Tundra Hammer is a gold cost stun option. And now are the ones that overlap more directly. So New Year's Blade inflicts an ice burn. So if you're going for an ice burn build, you might want this, particularly because it scales off hit count and isn't capped. You can use something like Tyrannosaurus Rex or Gog form to really ramp up that ice burn very expeditiously. Next up is Slaymore of Kindness and Might. So because that weapon is an Ice Beastmaster Warrior weapon, of course there's a good amount of competition. Because it gives your guests damage and it gives your pet hypercrit. So there'll be a lot of situations where you might want that over raw stats. But that being said, is it really going to outweigh that massive accuracy steroid and massive Damage steroid, my opinion, pretty rarely, although pet hypercrit is really good sometimes. Hollowborn Frost, I already said that already. So the Mechwog weapons, this one, it gives a permanent ice burn for melee. Obviously permanent ice burn is pretty good, so yeah, I can see why you'd want that. If you already have it, you might not want to use Nilak's Charm Surfboard. But again, I'm a huge fan of stat boost, so hey. And then Tenebrophage is a little bit of a weird one to be competing with, but because it's a hybrid weapon, it boosts strength and int. So if you're a hybrid Beastmaster, you want to pick between your Panic Eating or your Burn Eating. I don't know, there's cases for both. But I really do like this weapon because I think there's just so many ways to inflict burn, and you get a massive damage and accuracy steroid for 3 turns, so you can probably passively inflict enough burn to just upkeep it all the time. And so like I really think this is going to be a great Beastmaster weapon. I'm going to play around with it. I'm not sure how well it'll stack with things like Neko. Will I be able to inflict enough ice burn with my pet and guest? How much will Iceborne Visage help me out? Will I need something like Legion Lantern instead, which inflicts a stronger ice burn, but a greater SP cost? Stuff like that. So I don't know how it'll work in practice, but I think very much right now, I'm a huge fan of this weapon, and I think it will go really hard for Beastmaster warriors. Okay, so next up is the Invigorating Unity Surfboard. Now this weapon trades some damage to heal HP per hit, and the healing is based off of energy resistance. And basically, you can see on screen, but the competition is nickleclad, which does almost the exact same thing, except it doesn't have a little bit of healing resistance, and it doesn't scale with energy resistance. I'm gonna cut in this clip, which I went over it in pretty much detail. Live commentary, so the audio is gonna be a little bit worse. But here you go. Okay, so here is the quick clip that I'm doing live because I love the look of the Pride Unity board, Invigorating Unity board, but it just completes directly with a top tier weapon, which is the nickleclad weapon, which is available year-round, gold cost, which heals SP or HP depending on your lower resource. So right now it's healing HP only, and when it lucky flares, it heals 96 per hit. On average, it heals 51 per hit, if you take into account the turns it only heals 24. And this can be split between HP and SP. It can be only HP, it can be only SP. You can't control it actively. You can't toggle which it heals by, but you can, depending on your resources, heals one or the other or both. Pride board, first of all, it's a Pride board, so that's a big win, but you can see right now it's healing 49. They forgot to add the healing resistance to it. So it should be healing 52 per hit, but for anyone keeping close track, 52 in a hit versus 51 in a hit, not that much difference. I personally really like the utility of nickleclad doing SP as well. That being said, this does give 6.25 healing res if you're using other healing sources, and it scales with energy resistance, which is sometimes a good thing, sometimes a bad thing. So just to show you real quick, when you go against a monster with higher energy resistance, this one is 130, you heal higher HP instead. So if for some reason you're fighting Carnax with this thing, which actually gives me an idea, you'll get double your healing, where nickleclad will just get the same amount. But aside from that, I think it's pretty hard to recommend this over nickleclad, except for the fashion aspect. Yep, so those are my thoughts on the Invigorating Unity Surfboard. I think rare, but occasionally better than nickleclad. Is it worth the rare box for most people? Probably not, but it is a Pride board, so I bought it already, so it is what it is, Okay, so next up we're going to talk about the ultra rare boxes, and we're going to start with Sunscale's Tubular Legacy. Now this is a light board, which can, well, basically it trades like 30% damage to inflict, yeah, so it takes 30% damage and it inflicts power 7.5 burn, or no, excuse me, power 0.75 burn for 4 turns, and it inflicts 1 time for each hit, up to 4 hits. So if you have 4 hits, you'll be inflicting, I can't do 7.5 times 4 in my head. Yes, I can. 3. Nope. 3. Yes, 3. You'll be inflicting power 3 burn for 4 turns. And it's a trigger against undead to element seek that burn. Not just the burn, but the damage against undead foes. And when it's undead, you can toggle to do harm instead of whatever element it's seeking, if you have some burns on it. I don't know exactly how the toggle works. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal, probably. But there is some item competition for this. And keep in mind this is a ranged light weapon. So just to go through some really strong ranged light weapons, we've got Alchemical Unity, which can go to Crazy Blind. We've got Hikari Shamrock Naginata, which is a LS weapon, 5% boosted rate, which when you combine it with other stuff, boosts it even more. We've got Rainbow's, actually I'll go to that one later. Sacred Paladin Heal, so this is another weapon that is really good against Halberd, not heal. Sacred Paladin Halberd is another weapon which is really strong against undead, because it just heals you for so much every turn. This is a weird one, but Tangled Gnome checks, instead of like increasing the burn, you do Elevuln to increase your overall damage. I don't know why I put that in there, but whatever. It's fun to go through old items. Exalted Unity is an ultra rare golden gift box, so the same tier, and it's a damage option. And then Lovestruck Caliber is a 100 proc or 0 proc, whatever you prefer, which can be, ooh, Giant Chimera. It's kind of cool. And basically what it does is it inflicts massive bleed for a massive SP cost. I'm a pretty big fan of the, let's see, water weapon. Got Razor Blade and Sea Fiend Jr. Yeah, this thing's huge. Look at it. I didn't know this model existed. Huh. It's kind of funny. I think I'll call Lunastyle Catchero too. Why not? Happen to have it in the inventory. But anyways, so those are like some basic good light options. They don't compete directly with the light burn aspect or the light burn aspect, but what does compete with the light burn aspect is the Rainbow's End weapon. Okay, so what Rainbow's End does is it's a common golden gift box, and it pays 25% of its weapon damage, so less than the board, to inflict a 2.3 power burn on the foe for 2 turns. Now the reason I think this is so interesting as a source for competition is that the Sunscale's board does a 4-turn burn, and it's per hit. So in theory, what's my Earth Resin here? 43? Yeah, I can't do. That won't do. Oh, it's because I wasn't wearing the shield. Whatever. Well, the fire and energy damage aren't good enough, so probably not. It'll be close. Okay, anyways, the reason I think it's interesting is because the Sunscale board is a 4-turn burn, and if you have 2 hits, it'll be power 1.5, but Rainbow's End is a burn that doesn't matter how many hits you have, and it'll do a 2.3 burn for 2 turns. So if you're in a 2-hit armor, which most FD armors are, and I'm assuming you'd be using FD because Dot is a more FD playstyle. If you're using FO, what dark armors have? There's a dark armor with 3 hits. You could use Banshees, actually, that's neutral, 3 hits, but most people aren't ready for that. Anyways, for a good reason, honestly. But there's lots of ways to do 4 hits on a Ranger, but, I mean, you won't have it every time, you know? And so sometimes this common golden gift box is going to output more burn than the ultra rare golden gift box for less weapon damage. So you'll be dealing more damage with your weapon and doing more damage with your burn. Admittedly, it won't stack that way, and if you have 4 hits, of course, the other weapon will stack much, much faster and immediately faster. But I did think it was interesting that a common gift box can be such a good source of competition for what should be a much better weapon because it's an ultra rare tier item. Do I have a better guess? I can... Yeah, we're good with that, whatever. So I think that Rainbow's End is notable competition for this. But it's a pretty good weapon all in all for burn. You can inflict burn a lot of different ways with it. That being said, they released a dark version that is almost identical, it just doesn't have an undead belly seeking trigger. And it's a rare golden gift box, so it feels kinda bad in my opinion to buy this. But totally up to you, your own decision. Do that what you will. And I don't know how the undead trigger exactly works, and I don't know how the harm trigger exactly works, so take that with a grain of salt. But I'm not going to buy it myself, so unfortunate. Now next up, the one I want to talk about is the Carnax Carnage board. And this one is pretty interesting because it's an energy status spellcasting cutlass. So it trades weapon damage to give you an energy status after every energy spell. I think this is pretty interesting for several reasons. One, we don't have as much energy spellcaster boosting as we do other items. Two, it's got Carnax on it, which I love. And three, it trades 25% of its damage, 25% melee damage, which is pretty rare. I think the only weapons that do that are indirectly the Heroic Titan weapon, because it trades at 0 proc, it trades 3 MRM, and it trades weapon damage. And then also, I think it's the Mage's Staff. Let me take a look. No, is it the Warcaster Staff? Well, the Warcaster Staff... no, it doesn't. Okay. So, anyways, there's another weapon that does 25% damage for a spellcast, but I, to be honest, cannot remember what it is for the life of me. But what I'm saying is this weapon does trade more damage for its effect than most spell boosting weapons, so definitely something to keep in mind. It's a high output weapon. What it does is it inflicts a energy siphon poison. Energy siphon poison, I'm not a huge siphon poison fan myself, but they can go off if you build around them and or just have a good setup. There's also a notable lack of energy magic poison, or energy poison in general, but for other elements like fire, water, ice, dark, earth, there's a lot of magic poison support. For energy, I think there's next to none, so that's one thing you could keep in mind for this. It does fill a less full niche, but that being said, it also has a 90% SP control toggle, so it inflicts a control based off of energy resistance. I think that's poo-poo, because unless it's exactly 100 energy resistance, you won't get a 100% stun, because it'll either go over and do a weaker one for 2 turns, or it'll be under and it'll be like 85% stun. So I think that's doggy doo-doo. Probably don't buy it for the stun option, especially when there's better stuff. But you do inflict your stun passive while you're doing damage, so I mean I can see why some people would want it if they're resource dumping. Nuking hard, I think there's a case for it being useful, but not for me because it's not reliable. Unless they're exactly 100% or 200% energy res. Anyways, I'm going to go through some of the competition now. The Bloodblade is a rare golden gift box, which does attack and spell damage, so just direct damage instead of a status. The Energy Cutlass is an ultra rare golden gift box, so same tier, but just a massive plus 30% spell damage, so it could be pretty handy. Book of Love is a tokens beast mage compression item, can boost your charisma, can do some control eating, which is funny enough that you have a control item here, but you're supposed to use vampire control for the Book of Love. Anyways, don't get into that synergy because it's a tangent. Lightning Rod is a free spell compression option with notably a 6-hit spell, so quite good for some of those older, more restrictive damage cap bosses. Lord of Thunder, I forget the name of this item, but it's like the magic Frostveil axe weapon, or staff, Lord of Thunder staff, and it can do auto hit or burn. I'm not a huge fan. The auto hit's on an old standard. I don't like basic attacking on my mage, but to each their own. Mystic Kaisa is a harm and prismatic burn option for attacks. Nickleclad, I actually am a fan of this one, even though it's worse on magic, is SP and HP management and resource restoration. And the Butcherer is a rare golden gift box, which has a massive weapon-based LS chance nuke you can do. once per battle. But so, the reason I like this board is because it trades so much power, and it gets so much power for its energy poison, excuse me. That being said, I personally do not love Siphon Poison because it just, like, the value is so split between the healing and the damage. Now, what do you actually want? Healing and damage? Maybe you want both, maybe you want it split. You're not like too focused on nuking. You can relax and restore. There is a tokens energy efficient spell too, so you can get this effect for really cheap if you want. I don't know, for like 271 MP. I don't know of any other cheap energy spells. I'm sure there must be some, but I don't know of them. So I think they're rarer. At least energy spells you can access without another weapon. Like Book of Love has an efficient spell, but obviously you can't use Book of Love while you're using the Carnax board. Oh, you know what? You could use Dr. Doom's Misk. That's one. That would be super scuffed. Probably don't do that. I don't know. I haven't thought about it. But anyways, so there's a lack of efficient spells to get this for really cheap. But there is some poison gear that works pretty well with it. You could use Infinite Dark Caster. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, Infinite Dark Caster, which boosts all poison damage by 25%. Again, you can't really build the energy poison in that armor aside from just the spell cast, because it does a harm poison on both of its spells, if I'm not mistaken, which restores MP, but that MP restoration and the Ellie comped energy spell would pump some numbers for your management, but of course you'd be using an energy spell in an energy armor. Probably inefficient unless you use element res swap. So all in all, Carnax kneeboard, I think it's optimized because you've got a lot of damage traded for the effect. Ignore the control. Just got a lot of damage traded for a status effect on spells, which is really good. If you add the control in, I think you'd probably almost never use it, but it could be handy in a few situations. Nice to have, I guess. I don't know. But all in all, I think that I personally don't like Siphon Poison. If you do like Siphon Poison, or if you do have a poison eating build, this will inflict 150% melee, I think, every turn. Let me double check that real quick. Hold on. Yes, okay, it will be 150% melee of poison each turn, which is a lot for eating. So if you want to use a poison eating build, definitely an option you could consider. But with that being said, we're getting a bit late into this recording, so I'm going to go to the last weapon, the Archknight Board. Now, the Archknight Board is a pretty interesting one. So it's a melee weapon, and it's 0 proc, of course, because why wouldn't it be? Now that we have Warrior Lean, which... Anyways, I'm not a huge fan of that whole debacle, but that's a whole different topic. So, it's got 3 options. Actually, it's got 2 options. You can make it auto hit for 15% melee SP, which is like 60 or so. Yeah, 60. And you can pay 25% SP to inflict a minus 21% damage panic strength versus charisma save. So risk charisma save is a big nice addition to it. Or if you pay 40% melee SP, you get auto hit and the panic infliction, but because it's auto hit, the panic gets a little bit weaker, so it's only about 18% damage reduction. Now, I'm a huge fan of panic reduction, or panic. I think it's a really good defensive status. I'm a huge fan of auto hit weapons. Oh, blind, okay. Huh. I'm a huge fan of... Sorry, what did I say? Panic? I'm a huge fan of panic, I'm a huge fan of auto hit. I'm a huge fan of both at once. I think that's great utility. Some things that the subs don't say, they don't say if it scales off darkness resistance. So I don't know if this is always going to be 18% panic, or if it's going to be sometimes 18, sometimes 25, sometimes 12. I don't know, and I don't know how to find out. I'll ask someone. The big thing about this, though, is it also gives you 10 panic potence by losing some MRM. That's a huge advantage because panic is a save every turn, so you can't just like stack the potency once and then go for it. Here you can hold the weapon and just go to town. And keep in mind, we just got the Typhon Shard armor, which I actually happen to have it in my inventory. Can't show you right now, but that dark armor and water armor, there's 2, they're clones, inflicts a panic based off of Dark Elemental Res. This is the water one, but again, it looks exactly the same and does exactly the same thing. So you can stack these two and inflict a pretty nasty panic very quickly. So I'm a huge fan of that. And again, I don't know if the weapon scales off Dark Res, but if it does, it'll synergize even more with Typhon Shard, in theory. And the Panic Potence will stack with the Armor's Potence, so it'll just... I mean, Panic stacking is just nuts. Auto hit is good too, to have as an option. So I think this is a really good Dark weapon. That being said, there is a good amount of competition. So starting out in the common tier of Golden Gift Boxes, we've got Uragiri, which is just a good damage weapon. It's a nice weapon. It's really cheap. Damage and BTH for like what, incoming monster damage and MRM or something? I don't know. I don't remember. Which is nice to have. Eclipse Dragonlord's Patience is an SP management weapon. I'm a fan of those. I'm a fan of that as well. Or Eclipse Dragonlord's Blade, I think, not Patience. I wrote down the wrong name. But so you can have some SP management. Maybe that SP management lets you use a Panic, Pat, and Gist a little more easily. Who knows? Your 72 solos, I'm just saying. Okay, so hell if I know what I was talking about earlier. But I think I left off on Eclipse Dragonlord's Blade and Uragiri. So Uragiri is damage, Eclipse Dragonlord's Blade is SP, of course. And so I'm just going to go through the list of dark weapons that I think are pretty good. We got Doom Knight's Blade, which is great against undead. In theory, of course. For that LE Seeking, we've got Drakett's Fleeing Blade, which is an ultra rare golden gift box, same tier as this one, which gives you a an armor with the Dark LE Lock, which is pretty potent. It's also triple compression, I think fire and water dark, or kind of triple compression. Hunger is an ultra rare golden gift box that has 5% lifesteal for your resource, 5% melee of lifesteal, so 5% of the damage you deal, you heal. Twisted Atria Dagger. I'm actually not sure this weapon exists, but I think there's a melee version. It's like 1.5x LS chance or damage. Not really great. It's an ultra rare gift box, so kind of dog water. Legion Fan is a weapon that some people like. It's a bleed weapon. 0 proc, nothing too crazy. Tarnished Blade of Elders, another ultra rare golden gift box. This one is a Siphon Poison click skill. Can come in handy. Pretty expensive, but it gives you a lot of output. Here, let me just put on Zardade. Next is Carnage Maul, which is a gold cost 5% LS boost weapon. Gilek's Panic Reaver is able to eat fear for a LS hypercrit modifier, so that's pretty handy. Possessed Diabolical Blade is a light imbue weapon that can also give like Soul Forge or whatever that thing is called. I'm thinking of Magic the Gathering, but it's the light freeze. And then Stygian Cursed Crystal Blade is an HP management and restoration weapon. So kind of in that same theme as defensive with the panic, but instead of panicking the monster, you heal yourself. I think in some situations this might actually be better, but pretty rare, and a lot of people don't like that weapon. So I'm like a big fan of that weapon. Most people aren't, so take that with a grain of salt that I like it. But the one that really competes is the Qatar of Undeath. Now this inflicts an 8 panic multiplied by dark resistance on the monster, or a 12 panic at a -10 save if you are a Neko. Now the save for the Qatar of Undeath, I forget actually, let me look it up real quick. So the save is actually strength versus charisma as well. So it can be pretty handy, and you only get the -10 if you're a Neko, and you get 8 versus 12 from not being a Neko to being a Neko. All in all, I think, one, there's no, that I know of, dark auto hit weapon except, I guess technically, what's that light weapon? Exalted Unity, which you can imbue to dark and then imbue with auto hit. So like, I guess that would count, but there's not really a dark auto hit weapon that I know of, or can think of. So that's one great thing about it. And the panic is stronger than Neko's, although Neko's is gold cost, and this one is an ultra golden gift box. And when the auto hit toggle on, it's only a little bit stronger. Neko's is also free, 0 resource cost. If you have both toggles on the Archknight Board, you'll be doing like 40% melee is what? 200 minus 30s, like 160 SP per turn. So you'll be kind of bleeding yourself dry, even if you're only doing the damn panic and not the auto hit. It's still 125 SP. I mean, it's a lot. I don't know. So I think the board is very powerful if you have the resources to run it. Really strong. If you are an FD warrior and you're using Neko, Guitar of Undeath is probably an option that's almost as good. If you're not FD, Archknight Board is way better. I don't know why I keep saying Archknight. But that's my thoughts. There's a lot of good dark weapons, but Archknight Board definitely does what it does the best, although it is resource intensive, so I think there is a case to be made for Guitar of Undeath or Stygian Cursed Crystal Blade as other defensive dark weapons, which will not require you to spend a bunch of SP, or even Eclipse Dragonlord's Blade as a way to gain resources to funnel your defensive utility from other items like a Misk or a Choke Guest, for example, or Panic Guest again, creature 72 ratios. But those are my detailed thoughts on every item. Now, I want to say a disclaimer, and I'll probably put this at the beginning, but these items came out like 3 days ago. I spent like 2 hours looking at all the other items, of the elements that match with their type, that compete. I probably missed a few significant ones, so don't take this as your one and only resource. Look into the items for yourself as well. But those are my thoughts and my opinions. I had some fun going through this, going through some somewhere battles, and I'll see you all later. Probably to experiment with the Heatwave board, because I'm pretty sure this can go to town. Probably to experiment with the Nilak's Charmboard Surfboard, because I'm pretty sure that can go to town. But either way, it'll be a great time. Spread some peace and love. Let me know what you think, and have a good one. Bye-bye.